Hey everybody, Ron right here, and today I'm going to showcase my detailed guide for Summoner Necromancer. The build is really good and it can pretty much clear all the content in the game, can clear Uber Lilith, it can do tier 100, and it can feel great in almost any type of content. So if you really prefer the minion playstyle for the Necromancer, let's look into it together and I will explain how it works. So talking about our main mechanics, we have a few. The most important unit that you will need to use this build is a Ring of Mendeln. This is a ring that gives us a chance to provide our minions with explosion on their next attack. This is the main source of damage of the build, and most of the stuff that we are currently stacking pretty much here to just make sure that we will have this Ring of Mendeln proc. The second really important thingy would be Temerity. Temerity is an amazing source of barrier, and it can provide us with all the benefits that we can get from the barrier, like additional lucky hit chances on most of the items, better survivability, and stuff like this. So Temerity is pretty important as well. I'm also using Ring of Sacrilegious Soul. This is a new ring that was added some time ago, and this ring is pretty much here to just make your tier 100 runs pretty smooth. If you don't have it, this is 1000% alright. I'm using Exfall for the single target damage, since I think Exfall performs much better when we are talking about Uber Lilith, Uber Duriel, and stuff like this. So talking about the ways that we use to proc our mechanics, we're mostly focusing on using a lot of Hemorrhage to stack Fortify on itself to get this lucky hit chance procs, which is pretty important for bonus damage from Mendeln, and that way we can also generate some blood orbs to heal ourselves. We're also using Blight, mostly to get this additional damage over time bonus, together with Shadow Blight passives, and stuff like this. I also think that Blight is really good to trigger lucky hit chance bonuses as well, so we can just throw it and then attack with Hemorrhage instead. We're also using Bone Storm mostly to hit enemies around as well, to proc some Mendeln explosions too. We're also using a full set of minions, Skeletal Warriors and Skeletal Mages. We're not really using the Golem, mostly because we just don't have enough space on our panel. So this is pretty important to get other skills up there to make sure our damage is pretty good. Since we really need lucky hit chance procs, we can pretty much utilize the Vampiric Powers as well, such as Moonrise and Ravenous. I think both of them can complement build pretty good, mostly because we need a lot of attack speed to constantly attack with Hemorrhage, and then proc our lucky hit chance to get additional damage from Ring of Mendeln, which is the goal of the current version of the build. So the main rotation should be pretty simple, we just need to engage enemies, to send our minions to the enemies, and then cast Decrepify for additional bonus, additionally cast Corpse Tendrils and we have options, throw a little Blight there, and then just pretty much attack with Hemorrhage non-stop until all the enemies are dead. And if the enemies are pretty tough, we can also use a Bone Storm for damage reduction and additional hits too. The game style should be really simple, as you can see on the screen, and the only issue that we need to work around, this is minions dying, or our procs are not getting there. Since we need to combine a few different bonuses to do a lot of damage, it's mostly Shadow Blight passives that should proc together with our barrier bonuses, together with our inner calm bonuses. Sometimes our damage needs a little time to ramp up. This is totally normal, you can see it in the Uber Lilith fight at the start of the video. We need like some seconds there for everything to proc, and then we can pretty much melt almost anything in the game. So let's look what kind of items you will need to use, what kind of aspects, and how you can get this build going. Talking about our abilities, that's pretty unusual. I'm using the Hemorrhage as a basic attack, because I think Hemorrhage is a perfect option. It has a really high lucky hit chance. As you can see, it can rise like 51% compared to 24 from Reap compared for 25 from Bone Splinters, and only Decomposed can go to 58, but it's much slower. So that way we can use Hemorrhage for a real high lucky hit chance. It's also amazingly fast. Because of the Acolyte's Hemorrhage, it gives additional 20% attack speed while healthy, and that way we can attack really fast. It also generates blood orbs, and it's really good as well by innate bonus, because overall we can use blood orbs to heal ourselves and it's working pretty good. So I think Hemorrhage is just perfect as a way to proc lucky hit chance and work with everything else. And I think it's a perfect basic attack. Moving forward, I'm using the Blight here. I think Blight is pretty important as well. It has lucky hit chance, really high one as well. It can give us damage over time, so it will work perfectly with our other abilities, and it could also help us with Shadow Blight. Supernatural Blight is also mandatory, since that way we can deal more damage, including Mendeln procs. So I think it's working amazingly good. Hued Flesh is a really good option as well. We have a lot of lucky hit chance, so we'll create a lot of corpses, that way we will be able to summon our skeletons in case they will die, and they will die in tier 100 from time to time at least. I'm also putting some ranks into Blight, mostly because to do a little more damage. Moving forward, 3 points to Skeletal Warrior Mastery. I think it's pretty important because they need more life. It's mostly not to ramp up their damage, but just to get like more life. We're also not really taking the Blood Mist, since even if Blood Mist is really good, we don't have enough space. So moving forward with this. I'm also taking Death Embrace together with Death Reach, and Death Embrace get more points mostly because it can give us a little damage reduction against close enemies, and I think it's better that way. Otherwise, Death Reach is pretty much the way to go. I'm also taking Amplified Damage, mostly because it's like general increase together with Decreepify, Enhanced Decreepify, and Abhorrent Decreepify. I would say Decreepify is pretty important thing, because it can slow down the enemies, it could give us damage reduction, and since enemies under the Decreepify effect dealing less damage, they will deal less damage to our minions as well. That's pretty important, so try to curse enemies with Decreepify all the time. I'm also taking 3 points into Skeletal Mage Mastery for the same reason, mostly just to ramp up their life. Moving forward, and this is pretty unusual again, I think Gruesome Mending is an amazing thing. We can get a little more healing from all sources, including the Blood Orbs and stuff like this. Then 1 point into Coalescent Blood, we don't really need it, but we need it to move forward. And then Drain Vitality. I think Drain Vitality works perfectly with Hemorrhage for the minion build, because that way we can also always be fortified. And since we're always fortified, we will receive like less damage and it will work much better for us. So we will have barrier up for most of the time together with Fortify. I think it's an amazing survivability tool, and this one should be taken in all situations if you are using Hemorrhage. So moving forward, I'm taking Gloom, mostly to ramp up our shadow damage just a little. Unfortunately, it's not really work for Mendeln, so it works only with Blight and Shadow Blight itself, and not that important. Yet it pretty much worth 3 points, since it's not that a lot. I'm taking Corpse Tendrils, only 1 level, since we don't need a lot of cooldown here, together with Plagued Corpse Tendrils to make enemies vulnerable. However, it's just a second technique to make enemies vulnerable, and if you like Blood Orbs more, you can pretty much go for Blighted Corpse Tendrils right here. Moving forward, I'm taking Bone Storm as the ultimate, mostly because that way we can pretty much hit all surrounding enemies, and it's pretty strong that way. We can also get damage reduction, which is amazing, 15%, together with Supreme Bone Storm for critical strike chance, which is really important too, since our Mendeln pretty much can crit. I'm taking all the minions passives right here, like Bone Detonessence to heal our skeletons, Death Defense to get like armor and resistances up for them, and Hellblade Commander, because even if they're not doing a lot of damage, 3 points, it will pretty much help mages to kill at least somebody. And the last but not the least passive is Shadow Blight. We are taking Shadow Blight mostly because it works perfectly with the aspect that we are using at an amulet. So it's not doing a lot of damage, but it's doing some. However, when amulet procs, that's a really strong option. so Shadow Blade should be taken in almost all cases. Let's move to our Paragon. So, talking about our Paragon, that could be pretty tricky. We are taking both Resilience, together with Prime, and the Glyph here is Essence. This one's pretty obvious since we need critical strike damage and the additional bonus is pretty nice. We're also taking the armor here together with the dexterity and exiting through the top. Our first board right here is Bloodbath. That's pretty unusual, mostly because we need some resistances together with additional bonuses with damage while fortified. Since we are using Hemorrhage, we can be fortified like 90% of the time, so we can use all the damage bonuses while fortified without any additional things. I'm going right here to take Soft Resilience to get additional resistances, Thick Hide for damage while fortified. I'm also taking Powerhouse mostly to get this really cool damage while healthy bonus. You can also go for Guarded Advance if you have more points, but however, I think it's not that necessary. The Glyph here is Exploit since we can stack a lot of dexterity right here, and we can always have Vulnerable up on an enemy. We are taking Hardened mostly for damage while fortified as well, but not really taking Remedy since we have enough healing received bonuses already. We are exiting through the left, and the next board is Cult Leader. Cult Leader is mostly there just to get additional damage reduction for minions. We are taking Custody together with Overlord. And we're using Dead Riser here. Dead Riser here is mostly used for additional bonus. We're also getting additional damage reduction for minions with Dead Riser right here, mostly because it can stack for both like magic nodes and rare nodes. So we need to take those together with Custody to get as high damage reduction for minions as possible. We're moving to the left and taking Infused Caster, mostly for minion resistances to all elements. And for tier 100, I think Armor Clad is pretty much mandatory for our minions to survive better. So when we are doing tier 100, you can go right here and take Armor Clad together with like maximum minion life for minions. Then we're exiting through the left, and the next board is Flesh Eater. The Glyph here is Corporeal, mostly for additional resistances bonus, since that way we can pretty much cap our resistances to get them like to 69 at least, and it should work really good. We're also taking Erudite, even if you don't have enough willpower, but perfectly, if we will have enough, we can drop some resistances elsewhere. Together with Targeted, since damage to elites is pretty much really good bonus. I'm taking all the intelligence around for the corporeal bonus and taking Stifle to the left. Mostly because of the critical strike damage together with damage to injured combination, and I think it works really good. Exiting from the top right here, the next board is Scent of Death. Scent of Death is a really strong passive itself, so it's pretty important to take it. We will get some damage reduction with corpses, and if we pretty much deal with all the corpses, we will get additional damage too. So it's really good. I'm taking both Preservation and Deathmark together with Deathbringer and Ruin right here. And the Glyph here is Imbiber, since most of the time we are healthy, and since we are healthy we have a barrier, we have Fortify, and we will have this beautiful damage while healthy bonus as well. So if you're doing like Lilith or any kind of boss and you need a lot of single target damage, you can pretty much drop Armor Clad right here, like this, and use those points to go for Corrective right here, mostly for critical strike damage. This bonus is pretty strong and it will be really good in terms of additional bonuses. So if you're doing like single target, take Corrective right here, and if you want to go to tier 100, then it will be better to take Armor Clad here. I would say the only moment when we actually need any Changes, I would say it's Uber Lilith. Most of other bosses could be easily killed with armored clad up and without changing anything in the build. So go for the corrective when you're doing Uber Lilith if you really want to one-shot her in the same fashion that I did in the video. So, talking about our items. There are a few different compositions that we can use, but most of the time we just need to repick one ring. Starting with the helmet, I'm using the aspect of Occult Dominion for 2 additional skeletal mages, since that way we can proc more explosions from Mendeln, since every summon is pretty much doing the explosion. That way 2 more skeletal mages means 2 more explosions. That's pretty important. On the item itself I'm rolling like hit chance while you have a barrier, since it's really good and they always have a barrier in that build. I'm also rolling total armor and maximum life. The last stat can pretty much vary, but basic skill attack speed is pretty much working good since we are using the hemorrhage to attack pretty fast. Moving forward, I'm using the chest with disobedience, since it's still the best way to survive in higher tiers of nightmare dungeons. Speaking about the stats here, the most important part is to get maximum minion life on the chest armor. That way we can pretty much make our minions tankier and they will survive better, especially in tier 100. Otherwise we can also get maximum life, damage reduction from close enemies, and damage reduction while fortified, or damage reduction from distant enemies, something like that. Moving forward, as the gloves I'm using the aspect of grasping veins. This one is pretty strong since we need additional critical strike chance, mostly because our Mendeln explosions can crit. At the start itself we're mostly aiming for attack speed, critical strike chance, lucky hit chance and intelligence, just to get additional damage. We don't need any bonuses to skills, since it doesn't matter and our main damage pretty much comes from Mendeln. As the pants, I'm using Temerity, and I think Temerity is better than the Soul brand, just to get this barrier up. With a good Temerity we can have a huge barrier. For 76% of your life, it's like my version, and 80 at the maximum. Also Temerity is a pretty good item because it gives us a chance to heal with lucky hit, which is pretty important. Together with maximum life, I think it's pretty good and it works really well. Moving forward, at the boots I'm using the aspect of Blood Getter, and that way we need 2 more skeletal warriors. The reasoning is literally the same like with the skeletal mages at the helmet, we just need more minions to pretty much get more procs of Mendeln bonus. And the boots itself, we don't really need essence cost reduction, but we can use it if you have it. Otherwise, it will be movement speed, all stats, any bonus stats like dexterity, willpower or intelligence, and damage reduction while injured to survive better. At the wand, I'm using the aspect of the elements, and I'm not exactly sure this is a perfect one. We can use aspect of conceited as a weapon as well, since we always have the barrier. But unfortunately I don't have a really good aspect of conceited right now, so aspect of the elements could be a second option. I would say in my build recommendation I would go with aspect of conceited for the weapon. However, if you don't have it, feel free to use aspect of the elements. And the stats itself could be all stats, intelligence, critical strike damage and vulnerable damage. Moving forward, at the amulet we are using the aspect of the blighted. It's really important since that way we can stack our damage pretty high every time when we get the blight procs 10 times. That way we can get a huge damage bonus for all the damage that we are doing and for the Mendeln too. And at the amulet itself there's like so many different options and you can get almost any set of stats. Ranks to Gloom will work, ranks to Amplify damage will work, ranks to almost anything will work. This was what I had at my hands at the moment, so I'm using this one. Darkness skill damage is not important, so disregard it. Most of the time we just need total armor, movement speed and essence cost reduction if it's possible, just to spam a little more blights. Moving forward we are using Ring of Mendeln, which is pretty much obvious and this is like a part of the build. With this ring you are getting minion attack speed, high roll is not really that important, minion maximum life. This one is much better, and lucky hit chance. We also have thorns, but it's not really that important. So that way we can empower our minions and to get explosions from every minion when it attacks. Moving forward, the last ring could be different. For the dungeons, I recommend the Ring of Sacrilegious Soul, mostly to just feel comfortable. That way you'll be able to rise skeletons by default, like without clicking anything, and there also will be a lot of corp tendrils. The ring itself is pretty alright as well, since it gives us lucky hit chance, some maximum life, and it's pretty much working good. However, for a single target, I'm using X-Fall Corroded Signet instead. So if you're fighting Uber Lilith, or you're fighting like tier 100 boss, or any enemies that pretty much tough enough, X-Falls should be your choice. So X-Fall gives us lucky hit chance, damage over time, since we are doing a lot of this, and all stats, which is really good. It also gives us a chance for our damage over time to erupt and to damage around enemies. Since our Blight is doing damage over time and Shadow Blight is doing damage over time too, we have a lot of ways to proc X-Falls, and I think it's the best option for single target, to one-shot in Lilith, to one-shot in other enemies, so this is the way. For the dungeons, however, I would say Rings of Sacrilegious Soul should be better option. And the last that's not the least is our focus. I would say we can go with a shield if we have like better shield. However, right now I have the focus and I'm using this one. Aspect here is Aspect of Inner Calm. I think it's a pretty important one since we need to stay in place while we are casting, and it's an overall multiplicative bonus, so we can get it up for almost 100% of the time. On the item itself, you can pretty much aim for critical strike chance and lucky hit chance. However, as you can see, my focus is pretty bad since I don't have it, and you need to look for the build link in the description for the recommendations how to roll your focus better than mine. Yet, even with a really bad focus like that, build is still capable of doing everything pretty easily, as you can see in the video. Let's move to our Book of the Dead. So, talking about our Books of the Dead, this one is pretty tricky. I'm still using the Reapers. Even considered it could be bugged, sometimes it's working, sometimes it's not. However, I think that overall, considering the game worked as intended, Reapers should be an option. Second option here should be Skirmishes for one additional Skirmish Warrior. That way we can pretty much get some minions, additional ones, and this one more proc of Mendeln. So if you think that Reapers is not really working for you, go for Skirmishers. Otherwise, Reapers are pretty much it is. Talking about the mages, I honestly prefer Shadow Mages, because one additional bolt is a really good bonus. However, there's like a second option that can work for you. It should be Bone Mages, mostly with this one. So that way Bone Mages can deal more damage and could be more useful. However, I don't really think it's important enough, and I prefer additional Shadow Balls from the Shadow Mages. And Golem is pretty much sacrificed. Many people will ask me why, and the answer is because we don't have enough space on the panel to place Golem in there. And we can drop anything, because that way we will lose the damage. So I sacrifice Golem for 30% critical strike damage, but if you want more survivability, you can go for more life, and if you think your attack speed is not enough, you can go for attack speed. Any option will work pretty alright. However, right now I prefer critical strike damage. So talking about our Vampiric Powers, this one is pretty simple, but there's a few different options. Most of the time we will need Prey on the Weak, since that way we can make enemies vulnerable and we can get sweet 16% bonus to vulnerable enemies. This one is pretty much mandatory for almost all builds that can utilize vulnerable, and this is a really good bonus. Moving forward, we need Ravenous, since Ravenous gives us a lot of attack speed and we need to attack pretty fast to proc our lucky hit chance. I'm also really enjoying Moonrise since we're spamming a lot of Hemorrhage, and Moonrise is amazing for it. That way we can get attack speed bonus, and we can also get movement speed bonus. It's pretty important for the Necromancer, especially considering we don't have movement speed bonuses anywhere else. The last one is Undying, mostly because it can heal us over our health, so if you just simply use like our attack, as you can see we are receiving the barrier pretty fast because of the Undying. This is a combination of Temerity and Undying, and I think it's working just perfectly. So the last thing, most of the time should be Accurate Touch. That way we can pretty much use our high lucky hit chance to just inflict Vampiric Cures on all the enemies around, and make them constantly vulnerable. However, in some cases, you may need to drop Vampiric Touch and to use Metamorphosis instead. In such case, just place it here, it's not working right now, you will need to change a few procs as well. So if you prefer Metamorphosis, you can pretty much run with it, but please remember that you will need to dash through all enemies to inflict them with Vampiric Cures to have all our bonuses with Vulnerable. And I honestly think that current bonus with Accurate Touch just simpler and it works like by default. However, if you really enjoy what Metamorphosis is providing, pretty much feel free to use it instead of the Accurate Touch. So, it was my Summoner Necromancer build, and I think it turned out pretty good, even in Season 2 when we don't have an access to the prison anymore. I think it's pretty viable and can clear all the content, and working pretty good as it is. It could be improved even further with better items and stuff like this, and maybe I will do an update to it in the future. Thank you very much for watching, please like and subscribe for more Diablo and Path of Exile content, and see you next time.